Let me return once more to the day the matriarch of the Duke's mansion arranged my marriage, just as she had in my past life. She asked me with a smile, "What do you think of my grandson? In my past life, I was a lowly merchant's daughter who resorted to every trick in the book to marry into the Duke's mansion. But in the 10 years following our marriage, Jean never ceased to despise me. Later, to marry the woman he truly loved, he went so far as to force me to take poison and end my own life. In this life, I will not marry him. I intend to forge my own path to greatness." I curtsied gracefully. "Thank you, matriarch, for your kindness. I am unworthy of Cousin Pei." No sooner had the words left my mouth than the loathing in Jean's eyes suddenly turned to astonishment. I knew that, in Jean's eyes, I was a woman who would stop at nothing to climb the social ladder and marry into a prestigious family. In my past life, after Lady Pei arranged the marriage, I appeared calm on the surface, but inside I was overjoyed. All those months of scheming and going out of my way to curry favor with the matriarch had not been in vain. But now, I am grateful for the chance to choose again. Since Jean despises me, I will grant him his wish and no longer attempt to climb the social ladder by marrying him. I knelt on the ground and bowed my head deeply before Lady Pei. "Matriarch, I have resolved to enter the palace to serve the noble lady. In my previous life, when Lady Pei arranged the marriage, Jean did not object. But afterward, I overheard his conversation with the matriarch. This girl is mercenary and calculating. She is not a suitable match." The matriarch, however, shook her head. Though her background is somewhat lacking, she is quick-witted, resourceful, and resolute. She is fit to be the matriarch of the Pei household. I married into the Pei household as I had hoped, devoting myself wholeheartedly to managing every aspect of the Duke's estate, even the most sordid matters. Yet all I faced was a decade of neglect. Jean never once touched me. I longed to bear children and secure my place in the Duke's household, but Jean recoiled in disgust at every attempt I made to draw close. On the day I died of illness, Jean returned late after finishing his official duties. By then, I had already breathed my last. My spirit drifted, watching the lovely young woman standing beside Jean. Her eyes widened. "You're dead. What bad luck. If I'd known, I wouldn't have come with you." It dawned on me belatedly. She was Jean's beloved, the crown princess who currently enjoyed his favor. My funeral was held with the utmost simplicity. Jean buried me as if he were handling official business. His expressionless face never betrayed a single emotion. My spirit slowly faded away, but I wasn't ready to accept it. I wanted to see what it was about that crown princess whom I'd always found utterly spoiled that made Jean love her so. So I followed her back to the princess mansion. She lived a life of luxury and had remained a widow since her husband's death. Even at her age, she still had an air of innocent charm. She was indeed unlike me, with my petty scheming. But then I heard her complaining to her maid. "She's finally dead. I don't have to look at her and get annoyed anymore." "You stupid girl. You took way too long to find the poison." Thank goodness Pei Lang cooperated. Otherwise, with a brain as slow as yours, you wouldn't have been able to get rid of that slut so smoothly. It struck me like a bolt from the blue. So my death had been a premeditated murder. I never could have imagined that the medicine Jean had personally spoon-fed me, spoon by spoon, was a deadly poison. At the time, I thought Jean had been moved by Medhat. It was one of his rare moments of tenderness. My mind was made up, and Lady Pei did not press the matter, for the Duke's mansion had its own dignity to uphold. As for Jean, he must have been overjoyed to finally be rid of me. Even if he couldn't marry the crown princess, he could still choose a woman to his liking. But as I was about to take my leave, Jean stopped me. His handsome features were furrowed, as familiar yet cold as in my past life. His voice was icy. "What kind of push and pull tactics are you playing now? You, of all people, with your insatiable craving for prestige, how could you possibly be content to enter the palace and serve others?" The contempt in his tone left a sharp ache in my chest. I clenched my fists, straightened my back, and retorted, "Does Lord Pei believe that serving as the third princess governess is a lowly occupation?" I recalled how, in my previous life, I had devoted myself entirely to him and the entire Duke's mansion, only to meet my end by poison. I tilted my head and said sarcastically, "This humble maiden believes that compared to marrying Lord Pei, spending my days confined to the inner courtyard dealing with the Duke's household sordid affairs, only to likely meet a grim end in the end. Serving as the third princess governess allows one to put one's talents to use, comes with a salary and an official title, and is far more honorable." Pei Zhan's expression darkened to a terrifying degree. He snorted coldly, "You don't want to marry me. Yet you've been winning over the servants, prying into my preferences, and scheming at every turn to chance upon me. A woman so shameless and lacking in feminine virtue, does she even deserve to be a princess tutor?" I closed my eyes briefly. In this life, I would no longer go out of my way to cling to him. When I looked up again, my voice had returned to its calm tone. "Whether I'm worthy or not is none of your concern, Minister Pei." Pei Zhan chuckled lightly. "To become a princess tutor, one must pass the imperial examination for court ladies, a rigorous selection process, with so many noble young ladies of outstanding virtue and talent vying for the position in the capital. There's no way someone like you, a merchant's daughter with neither talent nor virtue, would ever be chosen." It felt like a stab to the heart. If Pei Zhan had ever looked at me properly, he would know I'm not as worthless as he claims. In the 3 months since I arrived in the capital, I've won first place in poetry at the 100 Flowers banquet and had my paintings sold for astronomical prices at literary gatherings. Even Lady Pei has praised and recognized my talents. Only Pei Zhan believes all this is merely a ploy to seek attention and win his favor. I smiled. It was indeed to get his attention, but not anymore. According to my memories from my past life, there were only 3 days left until the examination results were announced. My name would be at the top of the list. I had no desire to argue with him. I only knew that I couldn't make a single misstep from here on out. Otherwise, I would plunge into a bottomless abyss and drag my father and mother down with me. Yet before I turned to leave, the pale yellow pouch at Pei Zhan's waist still stung my eyes. In my past life, I had embroidered many pouches for Pei Zhan, but he never wore them. The one he always carried at his waist was the one the eldest princess had embroidered for him. It had remained unchanged for 10 years, and he treasured it dearly. "Miss, please try on this curved hem robe, made according to the palace specifications, to see if it fits." Back in my room, I let the maid help me into the solemn, intricately embroidered crimson robe. I let out a slight sigh of relief. I was glad I'd left myself an extra path to take. At this time in my previous life, I was joyfully writing a letter to my parents, telling them that Pei Zhan was going to marry me. And I was filled with delight as I looked forward to my wedding with him. But had I not been driven to the brink of despair, I would have married a man of equal standing who would love me wholeheartedly, just as my parents had hoped. But things did not go as planned. In the year of my comingafage ceremony, I was taken a fancy by a spoiled scion of a high-ranking family, who sought to force me to become his concubine. This man was brutal and depraved. Countless women had been tortured to death by him. My parents were terrified. After pleading in vain with everyone they could, they knelt on the ground until their heads bled. I forced myself to remain calm and used a distant relative of the Duke's household as a pretext. I have secretly pledged my love to Prince Pei Zhan of the Duke's household. 3 months. If Prince Pei does not marry me within 3 months, then whatever Lord Gao wishes to do with me is entirely up to him. The capital is a vast place, far from the emperor's reach. I assumed my bold claims and forced connection to Pei Zhan would never reach the man himself, and that Mr. Gao believed me to some extent, staring at me with lecherous eyes. "If the crown prince doesn't take you in 3 months, they'll have you stripped naked and carried into my mansion." I entered the Duke's mansion under the pretext of celebrating Lady Pei's birthday. When I first met Pei Zhan and bowed in greeting, I sensed the loathing in his eyes. Later, I learned that Pei Zhan, being in a position of power, had spies everywhere. The virtuous young Master Pei had been smeared by me, falsely accused of having an affair with the daughter of a merchant. His loathing for me had begun long before I even set foot in the Duke's mansion. "Miss, you're all dressed." The maid's words interrupted my train of thought. I snapped back to reality, dressed in the cumbersome Suji robe, and began practicing each movement according to the court etiquette I had learned. 2 months ago, the imperial consort happened to be seeking a female tutor for the third princess. She did not consider background. She appointed based on merit alone. As long as one came from a respectable family, possessed noble character, and demonstrated exceptional talent, one could qualify after passing the court lady's examination. At that time, Pei Zhan despised me, and I had no confidence that Lady Pei would approve of me. To secure another chance at survival, I signed up for the examination. Now that the results were out and I was about to enter the palace to meet the noble lady, I could not afford even the slightest mistake. You'll just have to see which audacious harlot dares to reject Brother Pei's proposal. A haughty voice rang out, and immediately, a young woman dressed in opulent, elegant attire burst into the room. She was strikingly beautiful. Pei Zhan stood close by her side, a look of indulgence on his face. The young woman glared at me and snapped, "Are you that lowly commoner? Why don't you kneel before me?" I lowered my gaze. This wasn't the first time I'd crossed paths with the crown princess. In my previous life, whenever we met at banquets, literary gatherings, or other social events, she would always find ways to make things difficult for me. I had assumed she was simply born with a spoiled and capricious nature. But I never imagined she took such a dislike to me solely because of Pei Zhan, a hatred so vicious it ultimately led her to poison me to death. I suppressed the hatred in my eyes before lifting my gaze to meet the crown princess. My voice remained calm as I said, "May I ask who you are?" "Young lady, you barged into my courtyard without so much as a greeting to Lord Pei. Such rudeness demands an apology." The crown princess grew even angrier. "Who do you think you are, speaking to me like that?" With that, she raised her hand to slap me. "Changyi, stop." Pei Zhan spoke up to stop her. The crown princess did not hold back, but I turned my head to dodge the blow. When I looked up, I saw that Pei Zhan had grabbed the crown princess' wrist. The crown princess stamped her foot in fury. "Brother Pei, are you going to protect this lowly woman? She dared to refuse the marriage, causing you to lose all face. I was merely disciplining her on your behalf. You said you'd always stand by my side and protect me for the rest of my life." A hint of resignation flashed in Pei Zhan's eyes. "You mustn't be so unreasonable." Only then did he look directly at me, the warmth gone from his gaze. "Kneel and pay your respects to the crown princess." I clenched my fists, knowing this was no time for impulsive actions, and slowly knelt down. "I pay my respects to the crown princess." Smack! The grand princess, still seething with anger, unexpectedly slapped me again. I knelt on the ground, my face burning with pain. Pei Zhan sighed helplessly and scolded me. "You spoke out of turn just now and offended the grand princess. It is only right that she disciplines you." I looked up and met Pei Zhan's gaze directly. "What do you mean by offended?" As the saying goes, ignorance is no excuse. As soon as I learned the crown princess had arrived unexpectedly, I knelt to pay my respects. Moreover, I wished to ask the crown princess regarding the matter between this humble maiden and Lord Pei. Matters of love and marriage are based on mutual consent. On what grounds does the crown princess presume to lecture me? In my previous life, by this time, the crown princess had already been married. Her secret affair with Pei Zhan was something that could never see the light of day. Sure enough, the crown princess' expression faltered, and she snapped, feigning anger but trembling inside. "How dare you!" Pei Zhan shouted harshly. "Enough. The crown princess and I have shared a brother-sister bond for many years. How dare you slander us?" I had never seen Pei Zhan so furious. I knew this was a desperate attempt to cover up the truth after I had exposed him. He and the crown princess were deeply in love, but because the Pei family held too much power, The emperor would never consent to their marriage. For some reason, thinking of this, I felt a faint sense of satisfaction. The crown prince's chest heaved with emotion. Then, as if she had finally found a fault in me, she looked smug and pointed at me, shrieking, "What you're wearing is the curved hem robe of a court lady. How dare you? Imitating official attire is punishable by 3 years imprisonment. Brother Pei. Have her thrown in jail." My heart sank. That law did indeed exist. Forcing myself to remain calm, I spoke aloud. To my knowledge, according to the laws of our dynasty, one is only sentenced for counterfeiting official attire when used to deceive or defraud others for personal gain. This commoner merely wore it privately to ensure she would not make a mistake when meeting a noble in the future. She neither profited from it nor caused any harm. In my humble opinion, there is no grave offense here. Put simply, this matter could be treated as a minor or a major offense, depending entirely on how the official chose to judge it. As the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. I felt a twinge of anxiety, fearing that Pei Zhan might have me arrested and thrown into prison. Pei Zhan fell silent for a moment before speaking coldly. "You have a sharp tongue." He then fixed his gaze on the curved hem robe I wore. "Are you really that confident you'll pass the exam to become a court lady?" I didn't know why he was concerned about this, but I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing he wouldn't use this matter to make things difficult for me, whether I pass or not. "Well, no, on the day the results are posted." Pei Zhan sneered. "Ugly people make a fuss. You don't know your own worth, don't even dream of becoming a court lady." I knelt in silence. With 2 days left until the results were posted, I felt calm as I packed my belongings, item by item. On the day the results were announced, I would also be leaving the Duke's mansion. On the day the list was posted, I squeezed into the crowd. But for some reason, even though I knew the outcome, I still felt a bit anxious, fearing some unexpected twist. That day, after Pei Zhan and the crown princess had left, he came back to find me. His expression was mocking. "You went through all this trouble to take the court lady exam just to get my attention, didn't you? I've already agreed to marry you. You don't need to pull these stunts anymore." I smiled. In my previous life, I had wanted to climb onto his high branch, but now, I couldn't get away from him fast enough. At the same time, I was somewhat surprised. He despised me to the extreme. There was no way he'd want to marry me. "I've reached marriageable age and need a wife. Our ancestors also hold you in high regard. However, there is someone else in my heart. If you promise me that after we're married, you won't cling to me and will simply fulfill your duties as Lady Pei, then I'll marry you," Pei Zhan said coldly. So that was his plan all along. That's why he neglected me for 10 years after our marriage to remain faithful to the crown princess, leaving me childless for the rest of my life. I refused coldly. "No. Thank you. Rather than relying on someone else by marrying, I'd rather make my own way in the world." Perhaps because of my cold, unyielding attitude, even though Prince Pei himself had humbled himself to propose to me, still refused. Furious and humiliated, he flung his sleeve aside. "Then do as you please. Don't come crawling back to me in disgrace after you fail the exams." The very next day, I heard the news that he was to marry another noblewoman. I suppose since he couldn't marry the eldest princess, it didn't matter to him who he married. But now, his affairs had nothing to do with me. I clenched my fists nervously, scanning the names on the list one by one. I had no way out now. I absolutely could not make a single mistake. But I wasn't at the top of the list. I had come in second. Yet the third princess would only hire one female tutor. Under the scorching sun, I shivered uncontrollably, unable to believe how fate was playing such a cruel joke on me. Why was this so different from my previous life? Becoming a concubine to that man surnamed Gao is a dead-end path. I thought again of my parents back home, who had worried themselves to the point of turning gray. In my panic, I felt a faint pang of regret over my own stubbornness. Perhaps if I had agreed to marry Pei Zhan, As long as I remained vigilant, I could have protected myself from all sides. If I couldn't have children, I could always adopt one, but there was no going back now. Once I had calmed down, I took a silver note to the minor official in charge of the examinations and inquired about my failure. The official took the note and snorted coldly. The grading this time was fair and impartial. You actually had a chance to top the list. But Lord Pei said that in your essay on teaching the little princess how to conduct herself, your answer was too aggressive and failed to hide your sharp edges. As a woman, one should use gentleness to overcome strength and repay grievances with virtue. My ears were ringing, and the blood rushed to my head. I never could have imagined that Pei Zhan was the one who had tripped me up. I had indeed schemed against him, hoping to use him to escape the fate of being married off as a concubine and tortured to death. But I had never actually harmed him. If he didn't want to marry me, not even Lady Pei could force him. Besides, he knew full well how desperate my situation was. He was cutting off my only means of survival, driven by the hatred accumulated over 2 lifetimes. I struck the great drum at the gates of the Jingzhou prefecture. Even if filing a complaint meant receiving 20 lashes, I would fight for justice. As the drumbeat echoed, a growing crowd of onlookers gathered. Pei Zhan's servant I don't know when had arrived hurried to block my path and whispered to me, "Miss, why be so stubborn? The magistrate said that as long as you're willing to beg him, he'll marry you. You needn't worry about being harmed by villains." I told him to get lost. While beating the drum, I shouted, "This commoner accuses Minister of the Secretariat Pei Zhan of the crime of partiality and unfair judgment in the examination." A commoner suing a government official rarely stands a chance. Moreover, when it comes to grading exams, there is no clear winner. It's a zero-sum game. Winning this case against Pei Zhan would be as difficult as climbing to the heavens. But I was willing to take the gamble. If I won, I would secure a path to fame and fortune that would echo throughout the land. If I lose, I'll end up in prison, and perhaps that would be safer. The heavy paddles struck my body. I gritted my teeth, enduring the excruciating pain. Even so, cold sweat broke out all over me. Though Pei Zhan was the defendant, his official rank in the emperor's favor meant the prefect of Jingzhou dared not offend him lightly. Trembling with fear, he arranged a chair for him to sit on nearby. Pei Zhan watched the young girl before him, enduring the blows without uttering a single sound. In a daze, he recalled his previous life. She had been just like this then, though later on, his attitude toward her had softened from his former coldness, and he had tried to bridge the gap between them. Yet she had always met him with a cold, distant face, refusing to speak a single kind or gentle word to him. If only she had ever softened her stance or bowed her head to him. Pei Zhan smiled bitterly. But then, she wouldn't have been herself. With each crack of the cane against her body, for some reason, Pei Zhan's heart ached in sympathy. Yet he had always been impartial in his dealings. Without a valid reason, he could not intervene. Still, perhaps a lesson was in order, to prevent her from remaining so recklessly defiant. "You insolent commoner, you've accused a 4th-rank official of the imperial court. Do you have any evidence?" "None." I knelt on the ground, straightening my back despite the excruciating pain. Of course I had no evidence. I couldn't very well say I'd been reborn, and that the exam results were different from my previous life. Without wishing to boast, this humble commoner believes her talents are no less than others. I do not accept the ranking of the examination results. Furthermore, according to the law, examiners and candidates must recuse themselves if they have prior personal ties. I once refused a marriage proposal from Lord Pei, and he harbors a personal grudge. I privately suspect that Lord Pei, driven by personal animosity, intentionally failed me in the examination. Everyone present wore expressions of utter disbelief. "How dare you? You claim that you, a mere merchant's daughter, refused the proposal of the crown prince of the duke's house. That is the height of absurdity. Have you lost your mind? Indeed, who would believe that I, a lowly merchant's daughter, would refuse Pei Zhan's proposal? were it not for the tragic end I met in my previous life. I too would have believed that marrying into the Duke's house was the greatest stroke of luck imaginable. At that moment, Pei Zainon of the main characters lowered his gaze, lost in thought. He must be furious, right? Having such a humiliating rejection made public by me. I waited for him to angrily refute me, but he didn't. He stared at me and said calmly, "What she says is true. The rejection is a fact." Everyone was stunned, including me. This wasn't like Pei Zhan. I met his gaze and saw that the naivety had vanished from his eyes, leaving only a bottomless stillness. I knew it, too, had been reborn. My opponent now was a Pei Zhan who had lived 2 lifetimes, weathered storms, and been refined by experience. The stakes have just gotten higher. Yet I have graded these essays without favoritism, whether a princess of the imperial family or a commoner. A woman's virtue is the foundation of her character, and her grace is the cornerstone of her legacy. A woman should possess a compassionate heart and a generous spirit, transforming jealousy into kindness, overcoming harshness with gentleness, and repaying grievances with virtue. As for you, Miss Shen, you are sharp-tongued and cruel, quarrelsome and combative, lacking in virtue and conduct. Therefore, you are not suitable for this position. Pei Zhan fixed his gaze on me. These words were directed at me. In my previous life, I purged the Duke's mansion of those parasites who bullied the weak, yet he blamed me for being ruthless and lacking compassion. Little did he know that if I hadn't been ruthless enough, how could he have enjoyed domestic peace and a smooth career path? Every time the Grand Princess deliberately made things difficult for me, I handled it with grace. Yet, to protect his beloved, he refused to distinguish right from wrong, always forcing me to swallow my pride, even making me kneel in humiliation at the Grand Princess residence for 3 days and 3 nights to apologize. But having been given a second chance at Lifia Life ID essentially been granted this time, I've decided to follow my heart in all things. I looked him straight in the eye. This humble woman holds a different view. Since Lord Pei considers himself impartial, I wonder if you dare to engage in a fair debate with me. If I win, I ask that Lord Pei restore my ranking. How dare you? The civil service examination is no child's play. It is not for you to change at will. Yet, under the stunned gaze of the prefect of Jingzhou, Pei Zhan spoke calmly. Agreed. Having been married for 10 years, I know Pei Zhan's temperament all too well. He prides himself on his integrity. Even if he altered the grading out of personal grudge, he would still use the pretext of fairness to make me concede defeat willingly. Moreover, the female official examinations were never as standardized as the imperial civil service exams. That is why he agreed. But I could not possibly let him win. In truth, the core of this debate boiled down to one question. Should one repay grievances with virtue, or with righteousness? Men vie for power through cutthroat intrigue, yet they demand that women be gentle and virtuous, regarding their husbands as their heaven, living out their pipe dreams. But of course, I could never say that. Standing in the Hall of Justice, I cited classical texts, consistently arguing that one should repay grievances with righteousness, and that a princess, above all, must not lose her dignity. I refuted Pei Zhan's arguments one by one. 11 examiners arrived one by one to cast their votes. 5 to 5. 1 vote remained. I looked at the handsome young man seated at the head of the table, and my heart skipped a beat. Zhao Yunxie, the crown prince's consort. It was said that this consort adored and doted on the crown princess to an extreme degree. What if the crown princess had ever spoken ill of me in his presence? I clenched my fists, worried that Zhao Yunxie might let personal feelings cloud his judgment. Zhao Yunxie smiled faintly, looking at me with a clear, resonant voice. You are exceptionally wise and possess great courage. I cast my vote for you. With that, he dropped his bamboo tablet into the tube marked with my name. His eyes filled with admiration as he looked at me. Pei Zhan's expression darkened. My heart, which had been in my throat, finally settled. I curtsied to Zhao Yunxie. Thank you, Your Excellency. For your praise. But just as I exhaled a long breath of relief, thinking I had finally won the battle, this princess believes the Shin girl speaks nothing but nonsense. If she were to become third sister's tutor, she would surely incite third sister to bully others and act capriciously. Moreover, she comes from a lowly merchant family and has the shamelessness to seduce men. Is such a woman fit to teach third sister? The crown princess strode in with an air of superiority, shot Zhao Yunxie a hateful glare, then looked at me with contempt. I cast my vote for magistrate Pei. Ah, well. What's the matter? Does the prefect believe I am not entitled to vote? I am a princess, and the eldest sister of my third younger sister. Moreover, my mother is a paragon of virtue for all women in the realm. Prefect, tell me am I permitted to cast this vote? Though the crown princess addressed the prefect, her words were directed at me, her expression brimming with arrogance and triumph. Yes, of course. In that case, the vote is tied. Therefore, I declare that the results of the female official's evaluation remain unchanged. Not wanting to offend the crown princess, the prefect obediently announced the result. Little did he know that what he had so easily uttered was, to me, a catastrophe. My face went deathly pale as my mind raced to find a solution. At the same time, I was waiting for that person to arrive. I gathered my thoughts and was about to speak up for myself. A soft chuckle. I merely wished to find a suitable female tutor for my daughter. Why all this fanfare? A woman of extraordinary beauty, dressed in luxurious finery, entered gracefully, supported by an elderly maid. I hurriedly knelt to pay my respects, and the officials all bowed in unison. Even the haughty crown princess reluctantly lowered her head and called out, "Your Imperial Highness, the Imperial Consort." She was Consort Zhao, the Imperial Consort favored by His Majesty and whose influence rivaled that of the Empress. I breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed the money hadn't been wasted. The message had indeed reached this noble lady. Consort Zhao paid no heed to the others, merely giving me a once-over before smiling sweetly. During the previous rounds of interviews and assessments, I had my eye on you from behind the screen. Who would have thought that when the results came out, you weren't the top candidate, and with such a lively scene today? I simply had to come and take a look. With His Majesty's approval, I have the authority to personally select the third princess tutor. You've caught my eye. So you're the one. My heart leapt with joy, but I kept my composure and immediately bowed in sincere gratitude. The eldest princess' face darkened, and she exclaimed in distress, "Your Imperial Highness, the consort, this lowly woman is unworthy." The consort cut her off coldly. "Chang'e, the second and third place winners were both your own choices. I won't hold it against you this time. But if there's a next time, don't blame me for being harsh. Your petty schemes won't escape my notice." The eldest princess' face alternated between dark and pale. The imperial consort then cast a meaningful glance at Pei Zhan. "And as for you, Minister Pei, altering the examination results at the last minute, had the Shin girl not claimed you were seeking revenge against her out of spite after your marriage proposal was rejected, I would have assumed you and the crown princess shared such deep sibling affection that you would disregard fairness and justice just to place your people near my daughter." Pei Zhan's face also alternated between pale and crimson as he explained, "Your servant did not." But the imperial consort had no time to listen to him. She instructed me to come to the palace the next day for an audience, then turned and left, supported by her matron. The day I entered the palace wearing the court-issued female official's robe was also the day I moved out of the Duke's mansion. Looking back on the 3 months I spent staying at the Duke's mansion, I had strived to excel in every way: artistic talents, culinary skills, embroidery. I vied to showcase them all. Yet in the end, it was my resolute and decisive manner in dealing with others that caught the old lady Pei's eye. I was deeply grateful to this matriarch for her appreciation of me, regardless of my background. After a solemn farewell, I packed my belongings and stepped out through the gates of the Duke's mansion. To my surprise, Pei Zhan was waiting outside the gate. Upon seeing me, He strode forward and said sarcastically. Just as I expected, you're truly cunning. You've even managed to get in touch with the imperial consort. I scoffed coldly. Since you know what I'm capable of, Minister Pei, you'd best keep your distance. Otherwise, if I ever turn my schemes against you, don't blame me. As I turned to leave, he blocked my path. His expression dark and menacing. I've already sent someone to Pingjiang to propose marriage. I snapped my head up. What did you say? Pingjiang was my hometown. Pei Zhan stared at me. You went to such great lengths to become a court lady, wasn't it all because, in our past life, I looked down on your background and treated you with contempt. Now that you've succeeded, I'm offering you a proper marriage with all the traditional rites and lavish gifts. Are you satisfied now? I laughed bitterly. I recalled my previous life. During our wedding ceremony, when he heard that the crown princess had gotten drunk at a brothel and nearly fallen victim to villains, he immediately tried to abandon me and go through the ceremony alone. Had it not been for Lady Pei forcing us to hastily complete the rites, I would have become the laughingstock of the entire capital. Yet afterward, he held a grudge against me for it. On our wedding night, he stayed at the princess mansion and did not return home. Since had brought up my past life, I didn't mind tearing away the last shred of superficial peace between us. I curved my lips into a smile and looked Pei Zhan straight in the eye. What makes you think I still want to marry you? Doesn't Minister Pei know that in my past life, it was you who personally fed me the poison that led to my miserable death? Pei Zhan's pupils suddenly dilated. What did you say? I said the medicine you personally brewed for me was a slow-acting poison arranged by the crown princess. I said coldly, recalling those final years of my previous life, when my body was inexplicably frail and racked with pain. I had assumed it was due to overwork. At that time, Pei Zhan's attitude toward me had gradually shifted. So when he personally brewed medicine for me to drink, I was moved beyond measure and never suspected a thing. After I died, watching Pei Zhan and the crown princess so deeply in love, I hated myself, hated my own utter stupidity. What was wrapped in love was actually deadly arsenic. I had calculated everything with the utmost caution, yet I let my guard down only with Pei Zhan. No, that's impossible. Pei Zhan staggered slightly, his voice trembling. Chang'e, she has such a kind heart. How could she possibly do such a thing? He regained his composure. Surely you're just jealous and resentful, deliberately framing her. Furious. I laughed bitterly, seeing him just as he was in my past life always, no matter the situation. Instinctively defending his beloved old memories flooded back. A wave of intense hatred engulfed me. I raised my hand and, with all my strength, slapped him hard across the face. Smack. Pei Zhan's body stiffened. I stared at the bright red handprint on his face and felt an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. Pei Zhan, believe it or not, the events of my past life had nothing to do with me. But the moment I realized I had been killed by you and the crown princess, I swore that if there is a next life, we would never meet again. If we do meet again, it will be as enemies. I made no attempt to hide my hatred for him, staring at him with an expression of cold, unyielding resolve. Pei Zhan's lips trembled, and a hint of panic flashed in his eyes. He reached out to grab my sleeve, as if clutching at a precious treasure he feared losing. Qingzi, listen to me. Even if it was indeed Chang'e who poisoned me, I didn't know it was poison. I took a step back and coldly cut him off. So what? You may have killed me unintentionally, but during the 10 years I was married to you, you treated me with cold indifference at every turn. I came from a lowly background and walked on thin ice in the Duke's mansion. I devoted myself entirely to you, yet you always sided with others to blame me. Everything was my fault. Later, I came to terms with it. I no longer expected you to love or pity me. I only wanted to bear a legitimate son and secure my place in the Duke's mansion. But what about you? Time and again, I humbled myself and set aside my pride to reach out to you. Yet time and again, you turned away from me in disgust, and your beloved she bullied me time and again. At the 100 Flowers banquet, she slapped me for no reason. At the literary gathering, she splashed tea on me and time and again. You defended her. Even that time when it was clearly she who pushed me into the lake, you accused me of trying to frame her, leaving me in a pitiful state, soaking wet, and forced to kneel at the Grand Princess Mansion for 3 days and 3 nights. The memories were countless, too numerous to recount. I closed my eyes, suppressing the churning resentment and hatred in my chest, and spoke softly. Pei Zhan, do you really think I would marry a man like you? Give it up. I'd rather face a mountain of knives or a sea of fire alone than ever marry you. Pei Zhan looked as if had lost his soul. Seeing me turn to leave, he grabbed my sleeve and said hoarsely, "It's not what you think, too." He was desperate to explain, yet the words seemed to stick in his throat. I didn't want to get entangled with him any longer. I pushed him away, turned, and climbed into the carriage. Half an hour later, the Vermilion Palace walls gradually came into view. The myriad emotions in my heart had slowly dissipated. Gazing at the towering palace walls before me, I let out a long sigh. In this life, I want neither love nor affection, but power and influence. When I saw the third princess, she was scrambling up a tree to retrieve the kite caught in the branches. The palace attendants were sweating profusely, desperately pleading with her not to climb the tree. But the third princess, her little face full of defiance, paid them no heed. The attendants sighed in relief when they saw me. Master Shin, please, you must persuade the third princess. I looked up, raised an eyebrow, and watched the little girl who had climbed halfway up the trunk. Are you going to forbid me from climbing too, just like the others? The third princess furrowed her brows, her dark eyes fixed on me. I smiled and shook my head. Go ahead and get the kite. Third princess, I've had a net spread out below, you won't get hurt if you fall. The third princess stuck out her tongue. I'm not going to hurt myself. Watching the little girl tuck her skirt and climb the tree, I felt a pang of emotion. This was the Empress as a child, truly different from other little girls. In my previous life, after learning I had been murdered, I refused to accept my fate. My spirit lingered for 10 years, hovering around Pei Zhan and the first princess, watching them live in sweet harmony. Later, a time of chaos arrived. The emperor passed away, and Pei Zhan finally fulfilled his wish by marrying the eldest princess. It wasn't until the third princess led the troops, quelled the chaos, ascended the throne, and settled accounts with the Empress faction that the eldest princess perished in that upheaval. As for Pei Zhan, he followed his beloved in death by taking his own life. Only then did the resentment in my heart begin to fade. The third princess' rise to Empress also made me realize clearly that power and status gained by relying on a man are far less secure than those grasped firmly in one's own hands through wisdom and an iron fist. Greetings, imperial consort. And your highness the prince consort. The palace attendants knelt and bowed one by one. I snapped back to reality and saw imperial consort Zhao and the handsome young man beside her, Zhao Yinxie. So he was the imperial consort's younger brother. I returned their bows one by one, fearing the imperial consort might find it inappropriate that I had allowed the third princess to climb the tree. I was about to offer an explanation. The imperial consort waved her hand and smiled. I loved climbing trees just as much when I was a child. I come from a commoner's family, and there was a tree just as tall as this one in our courtyard. Her expression was filled with nostalgia. Zhao Yinxie smiled and said, "If you miss home, sister, why not ask His Majesty to let you return for a few days to visit your family?" But the imperial consort shook her head, composed her expression, and said no more. Everyone knows that once you enter the palace gates, it's as deep as the sea. Before leaving, imperial consort Zhao asked me, "Do you know why I chose you over those noble ladies?" Before I could answer, she gave me the answer. Because I believe a woman confined to the confines of a mansion can never match the breadth of experience possessed by a girl who has traveled far and wide with her father since childhood, growing up amidst the world of commerce. Back then, I rose from a simple country girl to secure my position as imperial consort. I believe, Qingqi, that you too can carve out your own place in the world. I was deeply moved. If, in my past life, I hadn't married Pei Zhan but had chosen this path instead, what kind of scenery might I have encountered? After taking my leave of the imperial consort, I departed in the company of Zhao Yun. I found him to be quite witty when he recounted the gossip of the capital and his experiences in Jiangnan. Everything sounded exceptionally entertaining. I couldn't help but smile, until he said, "I'm leaving for Jinling tomorrow on official business." My heart skipped a beat as I suddenly recalled the major case that had shaken the capital in my previous life. The crown prince's husband and the imperial consort's younger brother had died on a journey to Jinling. According to the investigation, he had been killed by bandits. Remembering how he had helped me once, I couldn't help but warn him, "Minister Zhao, I've heard the road to Pingjiang is rather dangerous. You must take plenty of men with you and be very careful." Zhao Yunxie paused for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "Thank you for your concern. Young lady, what are you doing?" A few paces away, Pei Zhan's expression had turned terrifyingly grim. He stepped forward, placing himself between Zhao Yunxie and me, and glared at Zhao Yunxie with open hostility. "Prince consort, there is a proper distinction between men and women. I hope you will conduct yourself with dignity." I gave a cold laugh, just as I was about to speak, when a palace attendant hurried over. "Minister Pei, the crown princess has fallen from her horse and been injured. You must go see to her at once." Pei Zhan's expression shifted. His eyes filled with concern as he turned to leave. Zhao Yunxie chuckled lightly. "You are a most inconsiderate palace maid. The crown princess is injured, and I, the prince consort, am right here. Yet you did not inform me, but instead told Minister Pei." Pei Zhan's expression froze. He halted in his tracks and said stiffly, "In that case, please return at once to see if the prince's injuries are serious." Zhao Yun smiled meaningfully, bid me farewell, and departed. Just as I was about to leave, Pei Zhan blocked my path. He stared intently at me. "Qingzi, it doesn't matter that you don't want to marry me now. I will court you again, until the day I win your heart. As for that young man surnamed Gao from your hometown who wanted to take advantage of you, I actually had him crippled long ago. He can no longer do any harm. You needn't worry. Also, there were many misunderstandings between us in our past life. I can explain them all to you one by one. Perhaps after hearing them, you will forgive me." Ha! What good is belated compensation? There were no misunderstandings between us, and I have no desire to hear any explanations. I curved my lips into a smile as I looked at him. "Actually, getting me to forgive you is simple. I have a way." Pei Zhan's eyes lit up instantly. "Tell me. I'm sure I can do it. Kill the crown princess to avenge me, and I'll forgive you." Pei Zhan hesitated, then spoke with difficulty. "You've been given a new life. Why cling to the events of your past life? Besides, she is a princess. How dare you harbor such treasonous thoughts? What? Are you unwilling? Minister Pei, since you can't bear to part with your beloved, then stop pestering me." I gave a sarcastic laugh, ignored him, and turned to leave. "I'll take care of this grudge myself." After returning home, I immediately wrote a letter to my parents, asking them to refuse the marriage. Over the past few months, I've gone to the palace every day to tutor the third princess. Yet I keep running into Pei Zhan everywhere I go. He doesn't say a word. He just watches me from afar. Seeing him like this, I wasn't even angry. But the eldest princess flew into a rage. She frequently came looking for a fight with me. Unfortunately, neither I nor the tiny third princess were pushovers. The first time, the eldest princess tried to slap me. I dodged, and the third princess quietly tripped her, sending her face first into the dirt. The second time, the eldest princess tried to push me into the lake, but the third princess kicked her in, sending her tumbling in. The third princess and I stood on the lakeshore watching the eldest princess flail about in a sorry state. And in perfect unison, we shouted, "Oh no! The eldest princess no!" Our eldest sister slipped and fell into the water. Every single time, the eldest princess ended up humiliated, and Jean wasn't like he used to be, always taking his beloved's side. He was busy trying to mediate, attempting to resolve the conflict between the eldest princess and me. Unfortunately, he was overwhelmed. And the eldest princess, far from appreciating his efforts, only glared at me with increasingly venomous eyes. I knew she was preparing to strike a fatal blow against me, and I, too, was preparing my counterattack. But fate didn't give me that chance. Because Zhao Yun returned, seeing him arrive back in the capital unscathed, I breathed a sigh of relief. His eyes crinkled in a smile. "Thanks to Miss Shin's warning, I've saved my life. As a token of my gratitude, I'd like to invite you to watch a play with me." That evening, Zhao Yun took me, along with a group of soldiers, and kicked open the door of a private residence. The authorities are investigating a case, but what met everyone's eyes was a naked man and woman, entangled together. When the group recognized their faces, they were stunned. It was none other than the Crown Princess and Lord Pei, the heir to the Duke's mansion. Everyone exchanged glances, then looked at the Crown Prince, the very man who had led them to uncover this scandal, with sympathy. The Crown Princess turned pale, clutched the bedsheet tightly, and screamed, "Get out! All of you, get out!" In her panic, she spotted Zhao Yun and was even more horrified. "You've already. As for Jean, his face flushed crimson, spotting me in his confusion. His expression changed abruptly. He hurriedly threw on his clothes and stumbled toward me, desperate to explain. "Qingzi, it's not what it looks like." The princess drugged me. I turned away indifferently and walked out. What does this have to do with me? He isn't my husband. Yet I felt a sense of satisfaction deep inside. When no one was looking, I couldn't help but let a smile curve my lips. If Jean had truly been unwilling, he would have had 1,000 ways to guard against the Crown Princess. All of this was his own doing. The next day, the scandal of the Crown Princess affair with the heir of the Duke's mansion spread like wildfire. The whole capital was abuzz with the scandal. The emperor was furious and ordered the Crown Princess to face the wall in the imperial household department to reflect on her sins. Her husband, the prince consort, was indignant, claiming the punishment was too lenient, and demanded a divorce. The emperor granted his request, but the Crown Princess showed no remorse. Even commoners knew that a royal daughter had violated her wifely duties. And public outrage grew day by day. Ultimately, the emperor ordered the princess to shave her head and become a nun, confining her to a Taoist temple with no permission to leave. As for Jean, the victim of this affair, Lady Pei did everything in her power to protect him. In the end, to remove him from sight, the emperor demoted him to Lingnan on the pretext of investigating his alleged favoritism and fraud during the imperial court ladies' examinations. On the day of his departure, his servant came to me. "I beg you, miss, please go see him off. These past few days, the master hasn't touched a drop of tea or a bite of food. He's become gaunt and emaciated. The only time he shows any reaction is when he mentions you." I paused for a moment, then spoke under the servant's expectant gaze. "Please give him a message for me. From this day forward, we part ways. We are strangers on opposite ends of the earth, never to meet again." Several more years passed. The eldest princess, unable to bear the loneliness, slept with a woodcutter who bore a striking resemblance to Jean. They were caught in the act, and it became yet another joke circulating among the common folk. Later still, unable to endure the slanderous words of the masses, she took her own life by poison. Much later, as the realm descended into chaos, I followed the third princess to the frontier to defend our homeland. When I heard that Jean had succumbed to the miasma and died of illness in Lingnan, I was riding on horseback, surveying the fortresses the third princess had conquered. This would be her era, and it would be the era in which I realized my ambitions. 16. Side story. Pei Zhan never expected Chang'e to poison him. Nor did he expect her to bribe bandits to kill the prince consort. Back then, when Chang'e was forced to marry the prince consort, she pleaded with him, tears streaming down her face. Brother Pei, I don't want to marry that lowly peasant at all, but Father Emperor. In order to ease the conflict between Mother Empress and the imperial consort, made me form a marital bond with such a lowly man. Yet the one I've loved with all my heart since childhood is you. When Pei Zhan fell into the water as a child, Chang'e saved his life. From that day on, Pei Zhan vowed to protect Princess Chang'e for the rest of his life. But this time, the imperial decree could not be defied, and he was powerless to stop it. All he could do was swear to treat her even better in the future. After Chang'e's wedding, to avoid any appearance of impropriety, Pei Zhan knew it was time for him to marry as well. But his grandmother, after much deliberation, passed over all the noble ladies in the capital and actually set her sights on the daughter of a merchant. Pei Zhan had absolutely no fondness for this girl. He first saw her in Pingjiang. A bully tried to force himself upon her, and her parents knelt on the ground, their heads bloodied from banging against the pavement. Yet she stood there with her back straight, like a white orchid in the cold snow. Even though the man was powerful, she did not bow her head even an inch. It was the first time Pei Zhan had seen such a woman among the common people, and he couldn't fathom what gave her such pride. Chang'e had always been haughty as well, but she was a princess born to reign above all others. The woman before him, however, seemed so fragile. Anyone could snap her in two. Pei Zhan was inclined to come to her rescue and was about to order his men to intervene. But who would have thought that the very next moment, she would seize the opportunity to fabricate a scandal, falsely accusing him of having an affair with her. Pei Zhan was both furious and amused. This woman was cunning and quick-witted, but having his reputation slandered for no reason naturally left a bitter taste in his mouth. That was why, the moment he first laid eyes on her at the Duke's mansion, Pei Zhan was thoroughly displeased. But he thought to himself that if she simply apologized and explained the situation, he would forgive her and even lend her a helping hand. Yet she did not. She clearly wanted to get close to him. Yet outwardly she acted aloof and indifferent. Yet in private, she secretly inquired about his preferences, scheming to run into him at every turn, whether at the 100 Flowers banquet or literary gatherings, always positioning herself at the forefront to capture his attention. Having grown up in the Duke's mansion, where open and covert struggles were the norm, Pei Zhan detested such scheming and backstabbing. He saw right through her manipulations, which only deepened his distaste for her. Seeing that she couldn't find a way in here, she shifted her focus. She began to deliberately treat him coldly and distance herself from him, while at the same time currying favor with the matriarch. These tactics of feigned resistance and diversionary maneuvers made him scoff, and he found her increasingly disagreeable. Yet when the matriarch arranged their marriage, the joy deep within Pei Zhan, a joy he had been unwilling to admit, could no longer be suppressed. He didn't know what had come over him. After all, it was Chang'e he truly loved. To prove he hadn't changed his heart, on the day of the wedding, upon learning that Chang'e had been harmed, he abandoned her without a second thought. That night, Chang'e got drunk. He took her back to the princess mansion, where she clung to him, begging him not to leave. Later, in her drunken stupor, she lost consciousness. When he awoke, he found himself naked in bed with Chang'e. Pei Zhan was horrified. In a daze, he dressed and fled the princess' residence, cursing himself as a scoundrel for abandoning his new bride on their wedding night to make love with another woman. Overcome with guilt, he wondered how he could bring himself to explain it to her. Yet she wasn't the least bit angry. Her gaze toward him remained as distant and cold as ever. In that moment, Pei Zhan suddenly realized she didn't care about him at all. She had married him solely for the power and influence of the Duke's mansion. So why should he be so deluded? throwing himself at her when she clearly wasn't interested. The next day, he received news that the prince consort had been killed by bandits, leaving Chang'e a young widow. His heart ached for her even more. Once it happened the first time, the second time followed naturally. He and Chang'e maintained this clandestine relationship for several years. During that time, Pei Zhan had wavered and felt remorse, especially when Qingxi was pouring her heart and soul into the duke's household, and when she awkwardly sought his touch, hoping to consummate their marriage. He had indeed considered cutting ties with Chang'e, but each time, she would weep herself into a state of utter despair, swearing that if he dared to touch Qingxi or allow her to conceive his child, she would hang herself. Later on, one mistake led to another, and his relationship with Qingxi had become as hostile as water and fire. Seeing her look at him as if he were a complete stranger, Pei Zhan felt an uncontrollable pang of pain in his heart. Later, when she fell ill and Chang'e stopped clinging to him so tightly, Pei Zhan began trying to mend their relationship. He brewed her medicine and fed it to her himself, handling everything personally. Through his day-after-day efforts, Qingxi's attitude toward him gradually softened. As for Chang'e, she too grew more sensible, even showing concern for Qingxi's condition, and it was actually Chang'e who helped procure some of the rare medicinal herbs. If the two of them could coexist peacefully from now on, nothing could be better. Once Qingxi recovered, he would certainly fulfill her wish and let her bear him a few children. Pei Zhan thought with eager anticipation. But unexpectedly, Qingxi, who had always been so strong-willed, succumbed to her illness. On the day Qingxi died, Pei Zhan felt no grief, only a numbing numbness throughout his body, as if he had shut off his senses. He went through the motions of her funeral, numb and mechanical. Later still, he married Chang'e, yet he felt no joy at all. He would often wake up in a start from his dreams, only to see the woman sleeping beside him, and she was not Qingxi. A dense, belated pain began to tighten around his heart. How wonderful it would be if Qingxi were still here. Pei Zhan often recalled the first time he met Qingxi, how she had cunningly and defiantly outwitted the bully. Only later did he realize that his heart had already been stirred back then. If only he could start over, if only he could start over. Heaven had indeed been kind to him. Chang'e was purged by the empress and took her own life. He followed closely behind. He thought he must hurry on his way. Perhaps he could catch up to Qingxi on the path to the underworld. When he opened his eyes again, reborn into a new life, he saw Qingxi once more. Before he could even feel relieved, he checked his memories and discovered that Qingxi was no longer clinging to him. Instead, she had rejected their betrothal. She was going to become a court lady. This was completely different from his previous life. And the very next day was the day the results of the court lady examinations would be announced. Pei Zhan felt a panic unlike anything he had ever experienced before. Did she no longer wish to be his wife? So, in his panic, he abused his power to alter the results of the court lady examinations. If she wanted to escape him, then he would simply clip her wings. Pei Zhan refused to admit he was acting out of personal bias. If Qingxi had been more virtuous and gentle, their previous lives wouldn't have ended that way. He intended to teach her how to be a proper wife of the Pei family. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned. He never expected Qingxi to be so defiant as to report him to the authorities. Later, when he learned that in their previous lives, he had actually poisoned Qingxi with his own hands, it was as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him, leaving him stiff with disbelief, heartache, and remorse. How could he bear to admit that he had killed her? He would rather it had been himself who was poisoned. Thankfully, he had been given a second chance at life. Heaven had granted him an opportunity to make amends, but he never imagined that Qingxi would refuse to give him another chance. He sensed her resolve. Her every rejection, indifference, aloofness, and mockery pierced his heart like icicles. During those years in Lingnan, he often lay awake at night, startled awake in the dead of night. How had he and Qingxi come to such a bitter, estranged end? Later on, His body grew increasingly frail. After he died of illness, he did not wish to move on. His spirit lingered by Shenqing's side. He watched her help the third princess overcome every obstacle to ascend the throne. He watched her, as a woman, debate with the scholars in the imperial court. He watched her marry, start a family, and build a life. In the depths of his pain, Pei Zhan finally realized he had never truly understood her. Her life was meant to be lived with such unrestrained freedom. The end.